Alright guys, Mr. Rodney here. Just going to talk about a concept that you'll find often on different standardized tests such as the SAT, ACT, and etc. Linear equations. So, you just got done mastering solving equations. You can solve for X, but then now Y comes about, you know, and you're asking yourself, you know, where do two letters come from? So if you have an equation that says um, there are five marbles in a bag, and your friend takes three marbles out of that bag, how many marbles are left? So we have this simple equation that we can solve to see that there are two marbles left in the bag, right? There's one solution that makes this equation true. Well, life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes there are dynamic situations that we want to map and solve for. So we have, say we rent a car, and the cost of that car is 50 cents per mile plus a $5 activation fee. See, now there isn't any set 1x or 1y. Here we have an equation that we can use to monitor the situation as it develops, as it grows. So we have x, which is our input. In this case, our input would be the amount of miles that we drive, right? So the amount of miles that we drive will dictate the cost for the rental, right? So y would be our output. So our input dictates our output, and the m, that is our slope, or the rate. So in this case, the rate is 50 cents per mile, and b is our y-intercept. So you can kind of think of this as a starting point. So before we start driving, we have to pay that $5 activation fee. So as we look to graph, right, so our horizontal line, our x value line, that is our input, and our vertical line, which is our y line, is our output. So the more we drive, the higher our cost would be. And the higher the rate, right, the higher the slope, is the steeper that line is going to be, right? If I find a cheaper company, right, that means the cost is going to go up at a slower rate as I drive forward. Oftentimes, problems will give you a rate and a starting point as a means to give you a hint that you're dealing with a linear equation. So going back to our example, so the cost of our rental is 50 cents per mile, so that's the rate, plus $5, that's our starting point. So they may ask you, well, if you drove 100 miles, how much would our rental be? So all we'd have to do is input 100 into our equation and solve. So we're just solving for C. So C, 0.5 times 100 is going to be 50 plus 5. So we find out here that if we drive 100 miles, that we're going to pay $55 in total. Well, what if they say we are to be charged $500? And they want to find out, well, we would want to find out how many miles we drove to get a bill up to 500. So here we use that same equation, but this time we're solving for m. So 495 equals to 0.5 m. When we divide both sides by 0.5, we see that m is equal to 990. So to rack up a bill of $500, we'd have to drive a whopping 990 miles. And there you have it.